Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV.
I'd like to introduce Knute Buehler. He's the Oregon's leading Republican candidate for governor. He's been serving as a representative from Bend since 2014, and we invited him here to share his thoughts about some of the state's issues, including housing. So please join me in welcoming Knute Buehler.
Well, thank you very much for having me, John. I was very inspired by your poem. It's nice to be out of the Shark Tank of Salem for a few hours today, and I have to go right back and hear the forecast from the state economist on what the impact of the federal tax changes are going to be. So my guess, and I haven't seen it yet, is that we'll see more state tax revenue, and actually the majority of Oregonians will see a tax decrease. That's what I predict. Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. It's always nice to do these events. I want to just take a few minutes to explain why I'm running for governor, and then certainly more importantly, what I intend to do as governor. And if we have time, maybe take a few questions and things. I'm running for governor for a simple reason: to fix the big problems that have been ignored, avoided, and actually made a lot worse in Oregon over the last 3 years by Governor Brown. And importantly, and we always talk about these things, importantly, when we talk about fixing problems, also to improve the lives and livelihoods of every Oregonian, no matter who they are, where they live, or even how they vote. But to do this, it's going to take leadership. And leadership from a governor. Leadership that is a lot more independent and less partisan. Leadership that is actually interested in innovative ideas and solving problems, and not just a far-left ideology. Leadership that actually wants to solve problems. And I intend to be a governor for everyone who lives in Oregon, for those hardworking Oregonians who've been hammered by decreasing wages, combined with the high cost of just living in our state, the high cost of housing, the high cost of health care, the high cost of college education, high cost of just transportation, moving around the Portland metro area. And for those people who've been downright left out and left behind over the last 3 years with Governor Brown leading the state. Now, to help these people and to really move Oregon to a better place, there's a few problems we need to fix. 4 big problems, and they would be my priority as governor. The first is we have to rescue our kids, our teachers, and our public schools from an unacceptable status quo. Too many kids are being left behind right now. The second problem we need to fix is we have to increase the supply of affordable and workforce housing. It's now one of the leading contributors to inequality, poverty, and decreasing the growth of our economy. The third problem we have to fix is we have to save the Oregon Health Plan and other essential social services from the chaos and incompetence of the Brown administration. And I can't say it any nicer than that. And something new happens almost every week to reinforce that. And finally, the fourth problem, and possibly even the most difficult one of them all to fix, is we have to end the political dysfunction in this state. And the state leadership needs to recapture a sense of purpose. It extends merely more than trying to achieve power, position, and privilege. We all have to be in it together, and we have to help one another when we need it. Now let's just talk a little bit about those 4 problems. The first, and I think the one that shows leadership most importantly, is rescuing our public schools. I think it's the single biggest failure of Governor Brown, is her indifference to fixing our public schools over the last 3 years. It's just the last 3 years alone, 25,000 kids have failed to graduate from Oregon high schools. We have one of the worst graduation rates in the entire country, and it's not getting better. One of the shortest school years, some of the biggest class sizes, and despite decades of efforts from some of the best educators in the nation, quality rankings remain near the bottom. And we have never spent more on Oregon schools in the history of this state. Never spent more. We've increased the budget last cycle by 12%. Spending $630 million more on Oregon schools. But it doesn't seem like it, does it? For you who have grandkids or kids in schools, it certainly doesn't seem like it. Why not? Well, out of that $630 million that we increased the budget, over 50%, 55% actually went straight into retirement plans. It never got into the schools whatsoever. It's time to fix our runaway pension system. And here's what I would do as your governor. I would not sign a single new spending bill until I have a PERS reform bill on my desk. And I'd replace the 197 teacher contracts in this state. That's right, 197 teacher contracts with a single statewide teacher contract, which then forms the basis for local control, negotiation, and if necessary, binding arbitration. Those two changes, along with certainly much needed reform and actually how we teach kids, we need to personalize it, we need more choice. Those kinds of reforms really turn millions of dollars into the classroom, improve quality, and improve and change accountability to me, your governor, to fix our public schools. Now, the second problem we need to fix, and certainly something that you all in this room know a lot about, is housing, the lack of affordable and workforce housing. When it comes to housing in Oregon, too many Oregonians are frankly being left out and left behind. We now have a housing crisis in our state. And I've had a front row seat to this crisis, being on the housing committee in the Oregon legislature, and myself also owning some commercial and mixed use real estate in the state. And what I see is that from young professionals to seniors, people are having a hard time making ends meet. And they're unable, all too often, even to put a roof over their head. And you see the results of this like I do on our city streets. It's sad. It doesn't have to be that way. And there's too many politicians, my colleagues, who want to demonize people, place blame, rather than work across the aisle on real solutions. Our current affordable housing crisis is devastating families in the metro region, in vibrant cities like where I live in Bend, and even now in rural areas. It's even extending to rural areas, the affordable housing problem. I was just reviewing a situation in Sheridan, Oregon. Definitely a rural community. There's actually someone who wants to put 300 manufacturing jobs right now in Sheridan, Oregon. Problem is there's no housing, no workforce housing. It's not a shortage of land within their UGB. There's land, there's developers who want to build workforce housing. You know why they can't? A new classification from Oregon state lands with regards to wetlands. You have a situation there, a rural community, manufacturing jobs, people who want to build workforce housing, and the state bureaucracy won't allow it because of the expanded definition of wetlands. It's got to change. Now, overall, when you look at this problem, our problem with affordable housing, the causes, in my view, are twofold. On the macro level, we have a state economy that's not producing any longer enough good-paying jobs. A lot of jobs at the high end, a lot of jobs at the low end, not those long-term middle-class jobs we've grown to love. And on a micro level, a dysfunctional land use planning and regulatory system, among other factors, to be honest, that are severely limiting housing supply. We can't keep on going down this path. This issue is really crucial to the well-being of our state. And there's an abundance of evidence showing a lack of affordable housing is one of the major contributors to growing inequality, poverty, and lackluster job growth in many areas of the country. Increasingly, we now have 21st century segregation via land use regulation. But proposals such as rent control, which my colleagues in Salem seem to be very fixated on right now, will only exacerbate the problem. That may sound plausible in their polished press releases and campaign literature, but all you have to do is look at the facts with regards to rent control. And as someone who fortunately has a master's in economics, I know there are few things that professional economists universally agree on. But the negative effects of rent control certainly is one of them. If Oregon continues to have a high demand for housing, while our government continues to needlessly limit supply, we know what the results will be: even less affordable housing and price increases. And as governor, and I've done this to a certain extent in the past, I'll lead and work with the legislature focusing on creating more affordable housing. This can be accomplished by a variety of policy efforts, easing land use and building constraints in exchange for more affordable and workforce housing. As governor, I'd incentivize cities to lower property tax and SDCs for affordable housing. Let's limit challenges in standing to those who challenge cities' urban growth boundary expansions. Let's provide funding for infrastructure improvement. Let's encourage high schools to actually create courses for training in the building trades. Let's do a statewide audit of government-owned land and brownfield sites that could be rapidly transferred into the private sector for multi-family housing. Imagine what we could do if we crafted policy rooted in solving problems rather than narrow partisan labels and recycled legislation like rent control. The lack of housing is a clear indication, in my opinion, of an unhealthy Oregonian. It's an indicator, unhealthy Oregon. It's an indicator of a lot of policies that are going in the wrong direction. And it hurts every one of us in this state. Oregonians deserve better, and it'll be one of my top priorities as governor. Now, the third problem that we need to fix is we have to save the Oregon Health Plan and other essential services from the chaos and incompetence of the Brown administration. As a physician who's practiced for a couple of decades in this state, I realize there's lots of people who depend on these services, vulnerable people in our society. Sometimes it's even life and death for these people. The good news is over the last 5 years, we've increased spending on healthcare substantially, up 50% over the last 5 years. This has accomplished improvement in access. Now, 95% of Oregonians actually have access to healthcare. It's a good thing. The bad news is we've wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on a failed bureaucracy, which really should be going, those dollars should be going to helping vulnerable people in this state. Now, as a physician, as a physician and governor, I would shine a light on the healthcare sector to bring accountability, not because I want people to have less healthcare, but because I want them to have better health and less expensive care. And here's what I'd do. I'd reorganize the way Medicaid is delivered, focusing on wellness and prevention. I'd work on decreasing prescription drug costs, and importantly, every person in this state who needs mental health care will get it. Too many people right now are slipping through the cracks, and Governor Brown is not helping those folks. Everyone who needs behavioral health care needs to get it. And finally, the fourth priority, the fourth problem that we need to fix is we have to end the political dysfunction in this state. And we have to recapture a sense of shared purpose that for our state leadership that goes beyond the mere pursuit of power, privilege, and position. We need leaders in this state that produce policy that brings us together, instead politics that pushes us apart. And over the last 3 years, during my time in the legislature, watching Governor Brown, this has gotten worse in the state. The governor is so fixated on divisive national politics that local problems are going unsolved. In my time in the legislature, I've shown quite a contrast. I've been able to work with Democrats across the aisle to produce groundbreaking legislation on such things as expanding access to contraception in this state. One of the first state in the nation where birth control now is over the counter. I've worked with Democrats to protect loyal public employees who are calling out fraud and waste and abuse in our state government, whistleblowers that haven't had adequate protection. I've worked with Democrats to deal with the opioid crisis, a national epidemic, in innovative ways. Demonstrated that kind of independent leadership that can produce important bipartisan results. And anyone who may be concerned about my loyalty, I can assure you that as governor, I'll have only one boss, and that is the people of Oregon. Now, as I've traveled around the state the last 6 months, I've sensed that there is a hunger. People want change in this state. Despite the good economic times, there's a deep, unsettled group of people. And it's the majority of Oregonians. What they want is they want new leadership that actually has the courage, to take on these big challenges, these big problems, and importantly, will make the necessary changes to fix these problems. We used to do this in Oregon. We used to fix these big problems and relish it. We used to be known for that. So if you're like me and you love Oregon, if you know Oregon can be so much better, then join me in this campaign in cause. And I'm confident together we can produce the change that this state so desperately needs. So thank you very much. I appreciate your attention, and feel free to ask questions if we have some time.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.